You're listening to the Product Coalition podcast with Jay Stansell. This is where product mastery happens. This is where careers are made. Welcome to the Product Coalition podcast. Let's go.
Welcome back to the Product Coalition podcast. I'm Jay Stansell, and today's conversation is one I've been looking forward to because it tackles a problem every product leader has felt, but few know how to fix. My guest is Weiwei Hu. She's an analytics and AI leader who spent her career at the intersection of strategy, operations, and data. She's led initiatives across product analytics, market intelligence, forecasting, pricing, and most recently, AI transformation, helping cross-functional teams connect data insights to product direction and real business decisions. Now, what makes Weiwei's perspective so valuable is the range of it. She's worked at the highest levels of enterprise, driving insights for multi-billion-dollar business lines, leading product market intelligence that connected market and customer data directly to the product roadmaps. She's an author, a data science community chair, and someone who's seen firsthand what happens when analytics works and what happens when it just sits in a dashboard collecting dust. Here's the problem she keeps running into. 98% of the time, the data's probably there. The analytics team did its job, but the insight never makes it into an actual decision. It stays trapped in a report that nobody reads or a dashboard that looks impressive in a meeting, but changes nothing afterwards. So today, we're going to dig into why that disconnect exists and how AI is reshaping the analytics function from the ground up and what product leaders can do to make their data actually drive decisions instead of just decorating those slide decks. Weiwei, welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have you join me today.
Thank you, Jay, for the introduction. I'm really excited to be here.
You've got such a broad career of experience, and I'm really looking forward to the variety of perspectives and how things have changed throughout your career. Obviously, we're going to be talking about AI today and how that is driving the way you're going about your craft. But wait, before we get into that, could you describe a little bit of your career journey? What was it around data, analytics, and the world of software that attracted you into it in the first place?
Yeah, so my background has always been in data analytics and AI leadership. So I spent a large part of my career sitting between data and product and market executive decisions. And I spent a lot of time helping team try to connect strategy with execution and operations and what to do next. So I think today, a lot of companies have a ton of data, dashboards, and reports. And now with AI, the ability to summarize from the data and to be able to generate information is very easy. But what I see is like leaders and executives still struggle to decide what to do next. So I think that's why this conversation is really, really important and matter to me, because it is really critical for us to understand how analytics, especially with AI presenting in front of us, how can analytics move from, okay, here's what happened, to here's what the decision we should be looking for and should change. So AI makes this even more urgent because it can make things happen a lot faster and easier, but it doesn't actually automatically create better decisions or actions for teams and companies. So I really want to have this conversation with you because I want to have a discussion about how AI and analytics can earn more trust, show up more earlier, and how can people use AI more intelligently, connect their work to business outcomes like revenue, profit margin, customer experience, and resource allocation, all of these.
Weiwei, over my 20 years, I've sat in many strategy, either workshops or multi-day off-site sessions where executives are coming together talking about where we've come from, where we are, and where we're going forward. And a lot of time in those strategy workshops, it's all talk and post-it notes and opinions and thoughts. But very rarely has someone been in there, or does everyone who's currently in there have access to data and insights that backs up some of those perspectives. And I often find that in strategy sessions, it's all around the strategy, and then the homework after the strategy session is going and getting the data to determine whether it's the right approach or to validate it a little bit more, as opposed to being able to validate strategy whilst executives are ideating in real time around it. So my first question for you is, from your experience, why do analytics and strategy often appear disconnected in organizations as opposed to always turn up as one continuous package?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think from my perspective, I think analytics and strategy often feel disconnected because the strategy and all the important conversation start a lot earlier before analytics really kicks in. So strategy, for example, can start with like what the company needs to grow, where does it need to grow, and what are some of the trade-offs? What do we need to discuss, think about our business model? At those type of level of conversations, I rarely see analytics or analytics team have brought into the conversation. When analytics usually comes in is a little bit after. So when all these business strategy level conversation has already been discussed, and then it kind of reduced to like a smaller, a more concrete set of, I would say, task or requests. For example, like a product leader could say, our growth is slowing, but can you build me a dashboard? Can you pull retention metrics? So, and I think it changes the conversation a little bit because the analytics team do not get all the context of why we need to build this dashboard, why we need to pull the retention data. It all comes to them as a task to complete. So it changes the conversation from solving a business problem to reporting a metric. So I think that's the first problem. So a lot of times, analytics team has been focusing on answering questions. For example, help me pull retention data, help me analyze churn. But a much stronger question for analytics team could be something like, okay, for example, our new users from certain paid channels are dropping very quickly. We need to understand if the issue is onboarding friction, weak early value offering, or quality of acquisition. So it's unclear what kind of actions the business is, what kind of questions the business is trying to solve. So analyzing churn becomes like a generic task for analytics teams to pull a lot of data, run analysis. But at the end of the day, all the data may not serve the business purpose. It may not lead to the original question they actually wanted to solve. I think that's where, to me, the main disconnect happens. It's not like the analytics team do not have access to data, or they do not have capability to pull the dashboard together. It's really about helping business to define what decision needs to be made and what trade-off matters most to them. So I've seen people I've worked with, like analysts, like engineers and data scientists, spending weeks and weeks building dashboards that some of the product or market teams rarely even look at it, because really nobody play a role to connect all of these dashboards, reports, and metrics to a real business decision. What I've seen, then I have seen one simple analytics can change a roadmap because it is not a dashboard. It only show that a product problem was actually caused by low quality acquisition traffic. And that directly leads to a decision and the action happening right after. So I think this is really the challenge. And with AI happening in our world, it's making this problem even more visible because as we all know, AI can generate analysis very quickly today, all the way from the source data to a report. If the business question remains very vague or weak, an AI can actually produce a quite confident answer to the wrong problem much easier and much faster. So to me, I think to all the product leaders, as well as the business leaders, executive, as well as analysts, the very first problem we need to or question we need to ask is, what decision is an analysis supposed to support? If nobody can really answer this question very clearly, I think all the analytics teams probably need a better conversation with the business folks before building another report or dashboard. For me, the best analytics team are not just reporting or measuring or monitoring what happened. They are really the ones who help define and influence what should happen next.
I've had the same experience way throughout my career, where the difference between data analytics teams that are genuinely providing continuous value and
Yeah.
sometimes new value as well that no one expected are the ones that are afforded the time to
Yeah.
ask questions, be curious,
Yeah.
because they are so close to the data and the data structures. And when they're allowed to step away from importing data, reshaping data, preparing data, and running dashboards and reports, and they're actually given time to just be curious, well, no one knows those data structures and what's in there better than normally the analytics team. And so when they're afforded that time to just be curious and not deliver
Yeah.
on questions from people who are stakeholders or superiors, but actually can just have their own time to ask their own questions around the data, that's when genuine curiosity and better questions start to surface for the organization. And then those nuggets of gold from just prospecting randomly on a Friday, looking through a data set, all of a sudden come up that no one was even asking that question. It was a bit like mining for gold and you accidentally find a diamond. Like when you have that time to prospect, those teams are so close to the data sets, they can add unique value if they're afforded the time to go and discover better questions to be asking. So with that in mind, Weiwei, and affording data analytics and engineers more time, can I ask, as AI is taking over more repetitive work, such as sucking in data, preparing data, running reports, etc., where does the really high value human contribution move next as data engineers and scientists and analysts
Mhm.
are freed up from some of the more low value operational admin type tasks?
Yeah, maybe let me step back a little bit. So I think AI is overall, this is also my personal perspective, I think is compressing the work that used to make analytics team or a data engineering team look really valuable. Um, what I mean by that is that a lot of what happened like before, I think generative AI or AI that happened a couple of years ago, analytics team and engineering team spend a lot of time, let's say, pulling data together, because the value is getting the answer is very hard, right? So you need people who have the right set of skills, who could find the right data, clean up the messy data, write Python, SQL code, join different data sources, build dashboard, calculate metrics, write, prepare reports. All of these work used to make analytics and engineering team quite valuable. And AI actually is changing this layer very significantly. Today, large language models can write SQL in just a few seconds. Generative AI can summarize really long documents. An AI system can scan reports, detect data anomalies, create first pass analysis, generate like tables, charts, prepare like customer segmentation, come up with explanations, narratives, suggest possible root causes. This is real progress happening, and it's happening really fast. So, but for analytics, the real question is, if this is execution part of analytics work, which used to be quite valuable, and AI can do a lot of it, the question is, where does the value go in tomorrow? I think the value for analytics actually will move away from execution, pure execution, to, I would say, knowledge, insights, and judgment. What I mean is that deciding whether a certain data signal or pattern really matter for a certain outcome, whether the result is trustworthy, even if it's generated by AI, whether certain movement is an actual business movement versus a noise or a data issue, whether a certain, let's say, models like machine learning or AI model output actually makes sense, whether certain trade-off is really acceptable, is actionable for the business, and they could take actions on. The other part of the problem is really a definition. So what actually deserves analysis in the first place? What is really the bottleneck for a certain process or an outcome? Which metric do we really need to measure rather than providing just a ton of information? What is the business really trying to improve? And what is a question that is worth asking? So AI is compressing the execution layer, but I think the second and the third layer, the problem definition as well as the judgment, I think it's very hard for AI to replace. A lot of people talking about you need like this business domain knowledge, you need to build a context layer. And I think there's really no good solution so far yet. And I think the human value is going to still play a very significant role. So for instance, AI finds certain patterns. Let's say, give you a very specific example. Let's say usage dropped from onboarding. And then it can even help you to define, okay, we may see a drop from users from certain segments or certain channels rather than some of the other channels and segments. So this actually saves time. You can get all these results in a few seconds rather than people spending hours trying to get the answers right today. That really saves time. It gives teams and a really good starting point. But then what really valuable is deciding, okay, given this pattern, what does it mean? Is usage really, or is onboarding a product feature really the bottleneck? If certain channel, the usage has dropped by certain channel, did we bring the wrong users from that channel? Did we attract the wrong users? Is the real issue really about product fiction? Or did some ad promises something the product does not really deliver quickly? So AI can find pattern very easily, but it is really up to the analyst to be able to decide what pattern means and what the business should do next. And I've spent also a lot of my time understanding the impact of pricing. A few days ago, one of my team member came to me and say, "Oh, I'm so excited! I actually build like a price elasticity model in Databricks in just a few minutes with all the data we have. The model sounds really sophisticated and impressive." And then the same person came back to me the next day and say, "I looked at the results, but it's completely wrong. It just sounds so confident, and I almost believe it's correct. But it's just pulling these assumptions by itself without even asking me if this is the right assumption." So at the end of the day, the model generates very confident results, but it's not usable. It's not aligned with the context that we are operating in. So that's a really good example in saying how fast model will still need good business judgment, right? And this is where I think a good analytics team can play a very significant role or a big role in the future. And also, I think the other part is AI is really changing the relationship between analytics team with time. And I kind of mentioned it before. Much of the time of the analysts will go from extracting data, cleaning data, formatting, reporting, report writing, and slide preparation into better strategic thinking. Like, for example, checking real assumptions, like the pricing example I said. Ask better follow-up questions. Stress testing the conclusions, improve recommendations to be more actionable, and validating whether certain action we come up with is going to work. So this opportunity only happens if, let's say, our analysts and engineers spend more time doing those thinking and doing this type of analysis rather than into the usual mechanics, right? So if we can use AI just to create more dashboard and reports, I think the value is not as much as if we ended up leveraging AI to automate some of the manual repetitive work while spending more time thinking about helping business make better decisions and come up with better results, like how we improve margin, how we improve better acquisition retention, right? How we can have fewer false positives and less weighted investment from the business perspective. Yeah, so that's a long answer to your question.
No, I appreciate it because it covers so much. And listening to you talking through that, you reminded me of a moment going back to probably 2017 when I started my own data science journey. And one of the first maturity models when it came to data science and data engineering to an extent was the data, information, knowledge, and wisdom framework. We start with data, that becomes information. Information can be turned into knowledge, and knowledge, when built up over time, becomes wisdom. And when I think about the world pre-AI, most businesses, when it comes to the analytics function, had the data, could turn that into information. If they were invested in analytics teams or technologies, they could acquire knowledge. But wisdom was left only to the human, and it was really an ambitious goal to consume wisdom from the technology stack. It was the humans created wisdom really by interpreting knowledge and second guessing as to what the future may hold. Whereas hearing you talk there, what I'm hearing is that data, information, and knowledge component now can be almost automated. And now more of the analytics team's time can be spent on converting or identifying technologies, models, tools to create wisdom out of the technology stack, not just out of the human opinions, or create the wisdom that supports the human opinions, such as strategic direction or pricing change, etc.
Exactly.
Can I ask, with that in mind then, Weiwei, as a leader in this space, when you're talking to your peers around you that are in analytics and data, what's the conversations that you're having that's different that get them to change their mindset? So not just the mindset of the organization, but how to think about where they spend their time, how they go about their tasks or their objectives in the new ways for 2026. As a leader, what are you encouraging them to do different than they did 3 years ago?
Do you mean the business teams or the analytics teams?
Probably more so the analytics teams in the first instance. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a really good question. So I think analytics, for all the people from analytics teams, I really think, let me put it this way. I wanted to start with okay, a lot of the companies, we talk about data-driven culture. And I think that word is used a little bit too much, a little bit overused. So that tells me a company really values data. But at the same time, it doesn't necessarily mean a company is valuing outcome-driven culture. A data-driven culture only matters when data changes, let's say, business priorities, trade-offs, actions, and outcomes. So this is the very first thing I talk to people who work with me, either analysts, engineers, or architects. It's like we often talk about data-driven. This thing is already happening. So how can we, in with the presence of AI, how can we become from data-driven, move more towards outcome-driven discussions? So this will move us away from, okay, self-service BI, automated reports, like AI generated summaries, narratives, right? So you really don't really need to spend too much time focusing on just providing data. That's useful, but that's not all useful. What is really more useful is, okay, data changes a priority, changes budget allocation, changes product roadmap, GTM motion, pricing decisions, or stops a potentially bad decision. So, for example, a retention review that never changes, for instance, customer or user onboarding, targeting, lifetime messaging, or product roadmap priorities, I would say is very data-driven, but not outcome-driven. A potential forecasting review that never changes, for instance, revenue assumptions, go-to-market focus, or scenario planning, it's just a number or a target. A pricing discussion or dashboard that never changes how teams do discount, packaging, segmentation, or test a certain price decision, it's never going to lead to meaningful results. So I think that is the very first thing for analysts is really they need to change their mindset of providing data to how they can influence outcomes. And then treat analytics as a way, think about how analytics create value, right? I think for all the analytics team, it's not just doing the work and providing services. It's really about how you generate value in a way that help the business or your partner stakeholders to allocate resource better. That's my fundamental view. So for every analyst, ask what scarce resource it helps allocate. It should, for example, for product, analytics should help decide which feature we should be building or improve or pause or remove. For growth, the analytics team should really help decide which channels deserve more spend or investment. For pricing, they should decide, okay, how we protect margin. For customer support, you need to decide which segment or which account deserves like our more attention and, for instance, interaction with the customers. All of these are important things that can help business allocate their investment resource better. So I think that is where analysts should really think about how they spend their time and how they create value. And it's not just one-off, like providing a dashboard and fulfilling a request. It's really building through, I would say, daily operating discipline, right? What I mean is that a good analysis is really about sensing and communicating, building the data foundation, pulling the structured analysis, and delivery the results. All of these is important part of the whole operating model. So it's not about, I would say, it's doing part of the job really well, but the other part is relatively weak. If an analyst or a team is really strong at building the data foundation, but really weak at communicating the results, they can produce ton of work, but really no action generating from it. A team could really be strong at building all the amazing visualizations and dashboard, but there's really no insights or action coming from it or change any decisions. That is not really meaningful. If a team is really strong at finding what is wrong with data, but then does not go and fix the architecture or the foundation of the data, then they're just keep chasing for signals, right? So I really think you have to build for a strong analytics team, especially with AI present, you need to have even more emphasis on the daily practice of noticing, clarifying, testing, communicating, and follow through. So it's not just really a one-off thing, one-off job, right?
Nice. Within that daily practice, one of the things that's coming to mind for me, Weiwei, is as new tools are making on-demand information, knowledge, and wisdom available to stakeholders. The idea that we could be progressing, and we've always had this, an analytics graveyard. In the world of product, we have product features that either decline or drop off, and they end up just sitting in the product, and they need to be killed off and buried. Is in the world of data and analytics, as people are able to more ask questions in real time and get answers in real time, are we progressing to a place where some dashboards and some reports are now going to need to end up in a graveyard? And if so, as a leader, what do you look for to decide when we're no longer going to report on that, or we're not going to maintain that dashboard anymore? What are some of the decision tree moments that are going through your mind, or that you're thinking about assessing, in order to decide, let's go put that in the graveyard now, we don't need that anymore, we've got better tools or technologies or reports to use instead? How do you process that?
I get that question honestly fairly recently. So I think for me, the biggest difference is whether analytics change what the business does next. That's my ultimate point of view. I think reports, dashboards, those type of works tells you what happened. And I think that is very different from decision work. Decision work helps teams decide what to do next. So we see a ton of reports, for example, they build very impressive visualizations and shows output something like usage dropped by certain percentage points over time. So I think a much better output would say, okay, usage dropped by certain percentage point, but I think it's dropped because it's concentrated in, let's say, user onboarding step 3 for paid channel X. This looks more like an acquisition messaging mismatch than a full product onboarding, a customer onboarding design problem. And I would recommend our teams test messaging alignment before rebuilding the entire onboarding workflow. So the first version, and just say usage dropped by X%, it gives visibility, which is very nice, right? It's better than not having any information. But the second version gives direction and implications and potential actions. So, and I've also seen some dashboard that doing like A/B experimentation, and then they really give like amazing results, right? For instance, they celebrate like, oh, we do like an A/B test, we see click-through rate increase by this much. But on the other hand, an analyst, if they really care about this result, they will look at the data and say, oh, by the way, click-through actually increased, but our retention didn't improve. So maybe the team roll out the feature globally because it's roll out the feature that looks good, but once they check downstream retention, they realize, okay, and maybe we're just increasing the shallow engagement rather than a meaningful activation for our users and customers. So I think every dashboard should be tied to a decision. For example, you have to know who is using that, who is using a report or a dashboard. What decision does it support? What action should it follow if certain outcome or metric or test result moves? How do we know whether certain action worked or not, right? And timing also matters a lot. Our analysts spend so much time trying to build perfect reports, metrics, and dashboards for our stakeholders. But sometimes business need to make decisions really fast at the moment. it doesn't give them a lot of time to have this turnaround. So they need to strike a balance between, do we spend my time running perfect analysis, right? Or do I spend my time getting some really meaningful direction signal, may not be 100% accurate, but enough to allow the business and my stakeholders to make a meaningful decision and action. Either could be a pricing decision or budget discussion, enough to trigger a budget discussion, or having a review of launch plans, right? So I think that really needs to be a trade-off, like technically impressive versus practically useful. Yes, so I think the best analytics does not really stop at just explaining certain metric. It really needs to help business decide what they need to do next.
On that point, Weiwei, you've worked across product, go-to-market, executive leadership, and quite often I've found that the analytics leaders that can take one insight but explain it in different ways for each audience are the ones that are really able to ensure that insights cuts through and is meaningful to each, because it's not just the same story for everyone. They're able to retell that insight
Yeah.
differently for the CEO than for the sales leader, than for the product manager.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask, how do you recommend for your peers in the industry who discover an insight but normally would just send it out to everyone, how would you recommend they think about going that in a better way than just doing that?
Yeah, I really think this is a really important question. Part of the I would say the job of an analyst is communication. It's storytelling. So for example, the same data can lead to completely different decisions depending on who is looking at it. That is absolutely true. So that is why storytelling and stakeholder context matters so much for analytics. I never thought that analytics team is just a backend team. You have to understand, before you do any analytics, right? What are your stakeholders or your audiences? What kind of priorities they have? What kind of levers or actions they can pull? And how your story and your data analysis can feed into their priorities, decisions, and actions. That requires a lot of knowledge, context build-up, and meaningful conversation. Maybe not in a data context. Just say, help me understand what your day-to-day look like. It just gives an analyst and engineers a much richer context of what they're trying to achieve. So imagine like a retail company sees their sales drop by a significant amount in one category over, let's say, the last couple of months. If an analyst only tells them, okay, category sales dropped by 10%, this is information. It doesn't help them do anything or decide what to do. So for instance, what a merchandising leader may care about is, okay, which SKU slowed down most? Did pricing, assortment, or inventory availability change? Are our customer like trading down into a lower priced products? A different leader, like a supply chain leader, may care more about, okay, was my inventory got delayed? Did fulfillment issue reduce availability? A marketing or go-to-market leader may actually care more about, okay, did my campaign actually work? Is the traffic quality change? Did my paid acquisition cost get increased? Did my conversion drop after certain things happen? A finance leader may care more about, is this a temporary softness? Are we facing serious margin issue? Or is this a signal that our forecast assumptions needs to change or modify? A company CEO may care something completely different, right? He or she may say, okay, does this indicate softening or weakening customer demand, a higher competitive pressure, a changing customer behavior that affects a broader business outlook? So all of these questions for different people could be very, very different. And you cannot just expect one dashboard to answer all of these questions or one set of metrics to answer all of these questions. The underlying data may all be the same. The story and the decision path is going to be fundamentally different. This is why strong analytics storytelling is so important. It's not about making your charts and tables look impressive. It's all about translating maybe the same signal into decision context that each of your stakeholders and your executives really cared about. What changed, why it has changed, why it matters for that stakeholder, and what specific action they could consider taking next, right? So let's say, instead of, let's say, traffic declined by this percent, like a much stronger executive story could be our traffic decline, but I noticed that the bigger issue is conversion dropped after we increased price in certain categories. Our customer is still visiting online, but it's shifted to a lower price tier or item or a SKU. So I would really recommend reviewing our price elasticity before increasing price further or increasing promotional spend, right? But for like marketing teams, you could tell a completely different story with this exact same data and say, traffic from paid social increased, but our quality of conversion is getting weakened and return rates increase. So the lower, like the CAC is really masking weaker customer quality. So this will make analytics team look much, much more strategic, right? It's the same set of data, but completely different framing and different story and different decision and checkpoints for different stakeholders. And I think talking about AI will make this even more important because AI, as we said, AI can generate all these insights or information very, very fast. And the real value for analytics team is to know how you frame it in a way that different stakeholders, executive, can use and leverage this information and tie it to the decision they own and the actions they can take. And so I really think the best analytic storytelling is critical especially with AI presenting. And they should make all of your stakeholders and partners and executive feel like this data and this information really helps me making a better decision or taking a meaningful action next.
In an episode that's been all around AI and data analytics, what I'm really taking away from you here, Weiwei, is actually there's lots of technical stuff to do really well. If you really want to cut through and be in that top couple of percent, it's all around empathy for your stakeholders, understand how they see the world and reframe stories, just really, really caring about those stakeholders that are consuming the information so you can give them the story in the right way so they can make that fast decision that you keep coming back to. And it's actually all about being a really good human in the workplace, as much as this is about being a really good technical operator to achieve that.
Yes, yes. I believe AI is going to change analytics in really big ways. Yeah, but I think the teams that can win will not be just the ones that producing impressive dashboards and fast reports. They will be the teams that can leverage AI to ask better questions, trust what is the right signals to share, and help all of our stakeholders and executives make better decisions and faster, more accurately. At the end of the day, really the value of analytics is not just reporting or monitoring or performance measurement. It's the action, the decision, and the business result that follows. So it is my sincere hope, with the help of AI, more analytics team is empowered to influence that decision sooner, because that's where really the value of data and analytics gets created. Yeah.
A fantastic point to finish the episode on, Weiwei. I really appreciate you summarizing that so well. Thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed this conversation with you. And I also want to give you just a public shout out, appreciation for also your written commitments to the Product Coalition over on Medium. I've really enjoyed your articles and what you've published over there as well.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation, and thank you for inviting me to this podcast.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. To the audience, thank you for joining Weiwei and myself for this conversation. If you'd like to learn more about Product Coalition, you can head over to productcoalition.com to discover that. Until the next episode, thank you very much.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Product Coalition podcast, hosted by Jay Stansell. Got questions or want to explore more topics? Connect with Jay on LinkedIn or join the ever-growing Product Coalition community on Substack. Thanks for listening.